Hey, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Sober Yoga Girl podcast. I am so excited here. So, we're not only recording this podcast in the Sober Girls Club on a Sunday morning, I'm here with Sarah Williamson, who has been on a number of podcasts with me, but this time we're together in the same room in London, England, recording this call together. So, it's pretty fun. So,
Exciting.
yeah.
Real life. I just love it.
So, on today's show, we're flipping things around a little bit. We have done this once before, actually, with myself and Sarah. But Sarah's going to be interviewing me about my book, Sober Yoga Girl, which is coming out in a couple of weeks. And we're just going to be chatting a little bit about that and answering questions. So, welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be with you. And this feels like, in many ways, it's been a long time coming. And also, it's felt like it's come around really quickly. If I think now back to seeing those original Instagram clips that you did ages and ages ago when you were first writing your book in the pool in the hotel, do you remember those?
Yes.
To me, they feel like a lifetime ago and yesterday as well. Like, I've got that real conflict of time going on in my head. How does it feel to you around time from between then and now?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible because when I first started writing the book, I had a completely different life. Like, I was living in the Middle East and I was a teacher. And when I look at those clips, it feels very distant.
Yeah, incredible. If you'd have published a book then, so if that book that you first wrote next to the pool in that hotel, you'd have published that at that point, that would have been about, am I right in saying 2020, 2021?
2020, yeah.
How would that book be different to the one that you are actually going to publish in a few weeks?
That is a great question. So, well, the very first book that I wrote I had a lot of resentment towards people that I thought had caused me harm. The very first one that I wrote. And I think it was necessary probably for that point in my healing to write it out. And then it was also necessary to have a lot of time and space for me to look back and start to realize, and I'm even still doing it now. Like, in the last month, I realized there's probably someone that I painted in this book in an unfair light that I would like to make amends with before I publish the book. And so I think there were a lot of things that I didn't even realize I was still holding on to. And in this whole process that spanned several years, I was able to, like, get it out and process it and write about it, and then have some reflection, and then also resolve a number of conflicts, right? So one of which was a conflict with my ex husband who I was married to, and like, we now have started emailing again after like 7 years. And so I wouldn't have felt good about publishing the book at that time because we hadn't yet resolved that, and in the span of when I first wrote the book till now, like, he's gotten married and had kids. And so it's felt a bit like, okay, this is over. And now we've both healed, we've both moved on. And now it's something that can be published. But back then, which is about 5 years ago, it just wouldn't be right at that time. Yeah.
That sounds a lot like you have shed different layers through that time and had the opportunity to reinvent the book because you didn't press publish on it at that point in time.
100%. There's another conflict that I speak about in the book where, I had a yoga teacher when I was in Bali who I really didn't like. Like, I found him to be very, he was just really kind of strict and scary. And I walked away with bad memories from that experience. And he was a bit of a villain in the book. And I actually had removed him from the book entirely at one point because I didn't want to hurt him, basically. And, we live in Bali, very small island. Like, I just didn't want to cause him harm. And then in the end, I ended up just running into him in a gas station, and we had a coffee and were able to resolve everything. And then I said to him, like, can I put this in the book? And he said, yeah, you can name me, you can name my company, I don't care. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to name you or your company, but I will put it in the book. And so those are the types of things that I published many years ago, I wouldn't have gotten to that state of resolution. So
that's so nice.
Yeah.
It's so nice to have that opportunity to change and come through that stuff, and to have those kinds of meetings with people that we
Yeah.
might say are coincidences, and maybe they're not. Maybe, it was exactly supposed to fold out like that.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm interested to know a bit about the structure that you've chosen for the book, and I'm presuming that is a later iteration of the book. I'm
Yes.
presuming that structure didn't come in the early days. Can you
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about that? I think it's a not only fascinating but genius way of framing everything that is contained in the book, and I know everyone's gonna find out about it as soon as it hits Amazon and bookstores local to where people are. But tell us a bit about it and how you came up with it.
Thank you for asking that. Gosh. Okay, the very first version of the book only had 2 parts. It had part 1, which was like everything pre my mental health breakdown, and then part 2 was like everything post. And I'm trying to remember. It was working with Saloni Lakia, who was my first editor, and she is based in Mumbai, and I got to meet her earlier this year. But I can't remember whether it was like just going through the editing again and spacing things out, and then it slowly just became more and more parts. Like, I don't know that the actual storyline didn't change, but it just, at one point it was like 4 parts, then it was 5 parts, and then it became, there's 7 parts of the book, and then it became mapped out as the 7 chakras, which is what a lot of my work is based on. Like my yoga teacher trainings, a lot of my programs have 7 chakra kind of outlined, the sober yoga challenge. And so that probably came to be like, yeah, maybe the second time I was working on it. And then originally it was kind of like part 1 root chakra, part 2 sacral chakra, part 2 solar plexus. And then my yoga teacher, Anvita, read it in India. And she pointed out, you don't even explain what the chakras are, because I think to me, it's just so almost like innate, because I talk about it so much. I just assume that everyone knows. And so that was really helpful feedback. So the book is basically the timeline of my life is sectioned by chakra. And then there's a little bit of an introduction about the chakras, and then a connection to like a yoga series that I've developed based on the chakras. And yeah, that was not the original setup. And then the very interesting thing, the final piece to that was that last October, I had this student come on my yoga teacher training in Bali who was really convinced there were 8 chakras. And it was a bit argumentative of like, you're wrong, you're wrong. And I was like, okay, there's many different chakra models. But as I read into it, I was like, I feel like this has come into my field for a purpose. And what was really missing from the book is a bit of a kind of glossary of all the yoga concepts that are taught. And so that became based on that interaction I had with that woman. And so it's a 7 chakra book. And then there's the 8th chakra, which is all about yoga philosophy.
I love that. It's so good. I think the opportunity that we have to get other people's feedback, other people's opinions, there's so much that then shapes what the final, I'm going to use the word product, what the final story looks like, and then how it gets out into the world. That's amazing. I love it. For me, I love a framework. And so I love anything that I'm going to look at and go, oh, this is part of the route, the path that's going to take me to wherever we end up together. I really enjoyed that. Those are a couple of people who have either given you blessings or have given you something to think about or something to research further that's gone into the final version of the book. Is there anybody whose feedback, ideas, opinions you completely ignored, and you can say that here right now, and you can edit out whatever you might need to later on?
A lot of people were really encouraging and supporting of the project. And what was most helpful for me was having feedback from my Arab friends, particularly ones in Kuwait, because I really want to make sure that I'm telling the story of what happened there with as much like love and respect, and shining a positive light on that part of the world, because it is so close to my heart. And so that I really appreciated with all of their feedback around, like, this wording or that particular thing needs to be altered to be more appropriate. So that was probably the most useful period, I would say.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I suppose the flip side of that question is, was there any one person's feedback that felt like it really shifted things for you? So I suppose this question is less about editors and professional eyes on the transcript and more about people who were in your world in a different way. Was there anybody who really gave you something that was a real push in a different direction, or gave you a new perspective that you hadn't thought of to change things?
I mean, there's two that come to mind, and I would say one is my editor, Saloni, because when she first got the book, she was like, there were things in it that I'll give an example. There were 3 chapters about the traffic in Kuwait, like the driving in Kuwait. And she's like, this is just a fact of life for people in Asia. Like, she lives in Mumbai.
Okay.
She's like, Alex, like, this
is not interesting, perhaps.
Yeah.
This is not engaging. This is just like a news story.
Exactly. And so she really helped me take it in the direction of, and there wasn't much about my sober recovery journey. And she was like, we need more of that.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful. And then the other one that comes to mind is, I had a former employer in Kuwait, who owned a yoga studio I worked at. He looked at it and gave me a lot of feedback around like some of the stereotypes that I didn't even realize I was, perpetuating with some of the things I said.
Yeah. Have you got any worries right now about publishing?
Yes, which Sarah and I were talking about before we got on the call. And I think it's a sign of a good quality in me in the end, that I'm so worried about ways I portray people, even if the 2 people I'm worried about caused a lot of harm to me in my life. Like, and I believe that I've written about them I've tried really hard to write about them in the most neutral way possible. But we were speaking about how, there's some things that happened to me where I give the facts of what happened, and then I have an opinion that I've projected onto it of like, this is what happened in this workplace. And then my opinion is like, they didn't care about any of the stuff, and I recently kind of caught that of like, okay, this is the truth of what happened, and that can still be in the book. But my opinion that I'm projecting of them intentionally trying to, harm or whatever I think is that's subjective. And then there's like the objective facts. And I've recently had that realization around a couple of people, and perhaps I think it's a positive thing, because it's really people that I haven't gotten the blessing or made the amends with to write this. And so then I'm thinking, okay, how can I resolve this in a way, like Sarah and I were just talking about, in a way that's good for my nervous system? Like, I feel good about everything I'm saying. And it has meant some slight revisions, not to the storyline at all, but just to subtle comments about what happened, in my opinion about it, if that makes sense. And so that's my biggest worry, is like how I'm going to impact people's lives. And like, no one is named in the book, and no one could be identified, but I think it's probably a sign of like me really trying to live my yoga philosophy of causing no harm. And I don't want to put more like harm into the world. And so it's like, how can I tell my truth without hurting anyone? And so that's my biggest worry, I would say. For a long time, it was also about the Middle East in general, and me being a school teacher and me being worried about how people would feel about a school teacher in the Middle East. But I don't live there anymore. And so, and I've also come to conclude, the longer I've done this sort of work, I think it's actually very needed for this region. So even though it's not, the government doesn't have any addiction programs, there's no addiction education for kids in school, but like anywhere, these issues are going to happen anywhere. Right. And so I think the local people actually received positively what I was doing when I was on social media, and I ended up being in the radio in the Middle East a couple times. And so I think that was one of my biggest fears for a long time. But now that I'm like out of the profession as a teacher and I'm out of the region, I don't have that as much.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember you doing some magazine things as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, it was all, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know about what you would like the book to do for other people once it's out in the world. Have you thought about what you'd like as what your dream feedback from somebody else
Yeah.
might be, or how you might like it to be received by others?
So I remember the first quit lit book I read was The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. I forget what the author's name is of that. Catherine Gray. And I read about this book on a Facebook group. I was probably 60 days sober, and I picked up this book and I read it from front to back. Like I remember going out one night and being like upset that I was out because I couldn't keep reading the book. Yeah. And then after I discovered that book, between probably day 60 to day 100, I was listening to audiobooks in my car about recovery and sobriety. And my hope for this book is that someone else picks it up and it becomes that for them during that time of their life.
Yeah, totally. I think there are so many opportunities for us to pick up any number of books that fall into this genre, let's call it quit lit. And the more people there are that are telling their versions of their story, the more opportunity there is for other people to say, oh yes, that's a bit of my story. That sounds like me. That sounds like there's something after this that feels good. I mean, I always think that the books fall roughly into two camps. There's that idea of books that are more memoiry, and Catherine Gray would be a great example of that. I think like Bryony Gordon's Glorious Rock Bottom. I love Laura McCowan's books. And the other side is the more perhaps scientific type books. And perhaps we say This Naked Mind, Alcohol Explained, those kinds of books fall more into that camp. And it is great that there is such a choice out there, because it also means that we can pick up somebody's book and then say, oh no, that's absolutely not my cup of tea. That's not my experience. And it's good to have choice. Good to have choice of books. Yeah, becoming part of somebody else's roadmap in the future. So amazing if other people get to enjoy a bit of your story and that becomes a good thing for them. What would you like your book to do for you?
I mean, I think it's already served this purpose for me. And I really identify with, so obviously I'm obsessed with Taylor Swift. I've like followed her around the world for the past 2 weeks, but she recently released a book called The Tortured Poets Department. Or did I say book? Album. It's an album. And this particular album, it really comes to conclusion a lot of her things that happened to her as a young person, like some of her struggles and traumas. And if you've been following her story, you can kind of see where the storylines line up. And she wrote something in her, I think it was her Instagram post, that said something like, this chapter of the author's life is now boarded up, and there's no scores to be settled and no wounds to be avenged. And she realized that a number of the wounds were self-inflicted. And then she writes, once you've spoken your saddest story, you can be free of it. And I quoted this in the book because it really feels like that was my benefit to it, is like, I was able to make a narrative of my life and make sense of things that didn't really make sense at the time. And something I actually will add, which I did not say about my ex-husband, is that you might have seen this on Instagram, is that he's also 5 years sober. And he also wrote a book about what happened between us. He has not published it, but when this came to light, it made me feel like, okay, everything happened for a reason. And I feel like we came into each other's lives specifically to destroy them, like so that we were able to like hit rock bottom and then heal. And I would have never had this perspective at the time that it was happening, but because I wrote this narrative and was able to reach out to people, I was able to just kind of close a lot of chapters that were still open for me.
Yeah. Yep. It sounds a bit like there's some tying off of loose ends there, that opportunity to take that Taylor Swift philosophy. What else in terms of, we were just having a conversation earlier about some of the stuff, the unexpected things around book writing. Have you thought about what it will do for your business or credibility? What else is there around you as the professional owning the business that you do?
Yeah, so my hope is that it will just reach more people. My hope is that people will read it and what I'm doing will resonate with them, and whether that means that they join, you know, my sobriety program or another program or join a teacher training or another one. I just hope that it will help other people and inspire the change in them that maybe is needed for the next phase of their journey.
Lovely. So good. So good. So I'm presuming I haven't double checked this with you, that as soon as you've got the solid publication date, there's going to be the Kindle version and the book available to buy on Amazon and available once it's published through other bookstores where people will be able to buy their books. What are you most looking forward to as that launch date gets closer and closer?
Gosh, I don't know. I think I'm just looking forward to people finally reading it. A lot of people have said they're really excited about it. People I know, people I don't know. I guess I'm excited for it to be like read and received and to hear how it impacted people. Yeah.
Totally. I think sometimes you also don't know what you don't know, I don't know, unless you've kept a secret from me. I don't know that you've written a book before, or that stuff that we don't know is going to be on the other side of it. And I think the idea that people might be sending you photos of them reading the book from the, I don't know, the fish and chip shop in Cornwall or the beach in wherever, you know, that opportunity where people will probably through DM rather than or maybe they'll publicly be tagging you all over the place. Here I am reading this physical version of your book. What a joy that will be. Be so nice.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. But I remember when you released your book, I had a photo. I brought it up to like the north of Bali and was reading it there and sent a photo to you. So
that's you know, all the stuff that you never think of, because why would you? Why would you think of that? Yeah, lovely. So tell me a little bit then about what you're planning as far as a launch is concerned.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, you asked me that earlier and I'm like, I don't even know.
I'm thinking you've had 10 minutes to think about it now. Come on, what's your answer?
I was like, I don't know. Like, I suppose if my community was more gathered in one physical place, I would probably have a launch party, but I feel like my community is everywhere. I have thought a little bit about doing events in specific places where people are more gathered, like in the Middle East, for example. I might go back there and do something, but that wouldn't be immediately. And maybe something in North America and maybe something here perhaps, but that would not be immediately. That would be like down the road probably. But yeah, what do I have planned for the launch? I don't know. The book will come out.
Casual. She's so casual.
Maybe I'll meditate on that today and maybe I'll come up with an idea.
I'm hearing in here a launch tour.
A launch tour.
All the many places.
Yeah.
I did. But I'm going to nail you down on this. It needs some incredible celebration. It's really easy for us to achieve something in life and then go, yeah, that's it, done. What? Ticked off the list? This is so much bigger than something that you tick off the list. This is something to claim and really say, this is it, I did it, here it is, and these are the ways in which I'm going to celebrate it, and allow other people the opportunity to celebrate it with you.
Oh, thank you.
We all want to celebrate it with you. We're rooting for you on that launch day. It's exciting.
Oh,
So
thank you.
exciting. Great, fabulous. So is there anything that we can help or support you with now over the next few weeks? Is there anything that you can think for your community, the people who listen to the podcast and who are surrounded by you, that we can do?
Before it comes out, maybe not, but perhaps like on the website, soberyogagirl.com, there's a place to register your email to get notified when it's released. So you could do that. But I love the idea of when it's actually out there, taking photos wherever you are and sharing them. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Perhaps you could run it as a competition. Perhaps there's a little prize in there
that's a
for the
good
most
idea.
shares, or the
That's a good idea.
tag you all over the place.
Mhm.
Yeah. So much is around word of mouth. I think,
Yeah.
of course, we've got a particular, I don't know, Instagram following, social media following, whatever else it is, but so much around this stuff comes down to the good hearts of
Yeah.
people sharing. You've shared your story, someone else is going to love all of or bits of your story and be willing to tell the next person about it. It's good. It's good news.
That's such a good idea. I love that.
Excellent. Good stuff. And finally, I'd like to ask you a bit around the process of getting from 2020 to where we are right now on the cusp of publishing. Which have been the trickiest bits for you to navigate, and which have been the bits that have been a breeze?
Wow, it's a great question. I remember the first time I got negative feedback about part of the book, and I can't even remember what it was anymore. Um, it was feedback from Saloni, my first editor, and I just remember crying all day and thinking like that this project was going nowhere. It was like so painful to get that vulnerable feedback. And I do think over time I've developed a lot of resilience around it. So that was helpful because I have gotten negative feedback from people as time has gone on, which has been helpful to take on and necessary for the book to evolve and change. And that has definitely been hard. What's also been hard has been every time I think it's about to be published and then it's not. Like every time I think it's ready and then like the next expansion or iteration or whatever, but I do feel like now it is happening. But that's been challenging. Like just, I think I thought it was going to be published years ago. And sticking with this project for such a long period of time, that's been hard. And but it's been immensely valuable. And I would say to anyone who's considered like doing something like this, I would highly recommend it because it was so beneficial for me, for my own, well-being and healing. And even if that's all it is in the end, like even if the book doesn't sell that many copies, the value of it is how it's changed my life and my how it's helped me come to process what I've been through.
Definitely. Yeah. Do you already know what book number 2 is going to be about?
Yes. Book number 2 has been actually in process for a few years, and some people have seen bits of it who are on this call. So the second book is about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and it's like short stories based on all of these sutras, which are basically philosophical concepts. A lot of them are referenced in Sober Yoga Girl book, but this is it's more of a teaching book as opposed to a story. And although it has many stories in it, but that has been a long process. And this one is harder or not harder, it's just different because I have to learn and educate myself about every sutra and then make a connection and then write something about it. So it's not the same as when I wrote my memoir and it was just like, this happened, this happened, this happened. And so it's a different project, but I'm really enjoying it. And it feels less about healing because it doesn't feel like there's things that need to be resolved. And it's more about just little stories of like, this happened, and this reflects onto this concept that I've learned, and this is a method of teaching it.
So it sounds as if it's more around your insights and your wisdom gathered since you've put down So the Yoga Girl book.
Exactly.
Writing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That sounds incredible. I am really, really looking forward to leaving my 5-star review on Amazon as soon as I can do, but clearly I can't do that yet because it isn't quite published. I've been fortunate enough to read the book, and it is incredible. It is a beautifully, beautifully written book. I can see the love and the hard work that you've put into it, and I can only imagine the different iterations that it has been through over time. But what I can say to you now is I can see that your energy and that your soul has really been put into the work, and I'm excited for other people to be able to buy it as soon as it is available. So I know you're going to be able over the next few weeks to talk more as the launch date, as the publication gets closer, but I'd just love to take this opportunity to say congratulations for writing it. It's such a good thing going out into the world. Well done. And the rest of all of the people who follow you are going to be so lucky being able to buy that and read that over the coming days, weeks, months. It's going to be such a good thing out in the world. Congrats.
Thank you so much.
Lovely, good stuff. Have you got anything that you would like to add on to the end of this part with my questions that you'd love to tell us about the book, or anything that's coming up soon?
Nothing else. I just want to say thank you. You're an amazing interviewer, amazing friend, and I appreciate that you read the whole book, because I know that it's long.
It is not, yeah. And I do. When I looked at how many pages, I thought, right, I do actually have to put down the other 3 books that I'm reading at the moment and get this done by Sunday so we can record.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. Thank you.